welcome to Moneyline MMA coverage of UFC 288. This is a long-awaited matchup between Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo for the Bantamweight strap. Before I get too deep into things, a quick recap from last week's fights, with Ricky Simone unfortunately taking the loss in my most confident pick. And that being said, it was a great fight, but he just couldn't bring it through in the end. He ended up losing that fight. The co-main event, though, Kyle Barajo got the job done. So it was still overall a pretty decent day for Moneyline MMA. And we're going to continue bringing the heat to you guys this week as we have one of the better looking pay-per-view cards so far this year. Definitely not the best, but it's up there. This is going to be coming with the prelims starting at 5 p.m. Central Time. This fight will be taking place in Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center, but it's otherwise not really going to affect most American viewers because the time will still land at the typical pay-per-view time. That being said, we're going to bring our picks to you as usual with the confidence layout in terms of our most confident picks coming first. All five of the main fights, card fights are on the table here. And essentially what we're doing is with our 5-weight, we're saying that that's the most weight, the most confidence we have in a specific pick. And in order, we're making picks going down from 4, 3, 2, 1, saying that we have that much confidence in the pick. So it's essentially taking an extra step in not only making a pick on the fight, but giving some confidence to it. So the listeners, so you guys can hear just a differential between one pick and another, because we can sit here and pick fights all day long, but I think it matters and it helps you guys get an idea more when we give a confidence level to it. Who are we more or less confident in? Essentially, who are our locks, right? Our 5 weights are going to be the locks of the week, and the 1 weight is going to be a guy that we still think will win, but we're a lot less confident in than the lock. So it doesn't have anything to do with underdogs. If you think an underdog is the most guaranteed pick, then your underdog could be the 5 weight. It's just a matter of 5 being the most confident, 1 being the least of the confident, right? 1 doesn't mean you're not confident because you're still making the pick, but I'm saying it's the least of the confidence. So that explanation out of the way, my most confident pick for this week is going to be Movsar Evloev in his fight against Bryce Mitchell. This will be the second fight coming on the main card this Saturday. Movsar is minus 290, one of the bigger favorites on this whole card against Bryce Mitchell, a plus 215 dog. Bryce Mitchell's coming off a tough loss. Evloev is on fire. Jose, what do you have for a weight on this pick?
Yes, so for this fit, I actually have Evloev, and he's my 3-weight. Reason being is, he's just been on a hot streak lately. I mean, getting multiple unanimous decision wins over Hakeem Dawodu and Dan Ige. I mean, especially that Dan Egan fight. He's proven that he can, and he's been actually going to the decision for quite some time, and he's running and he's even gone 5 rounds that he's won via KO in the 5th round. But since that's happened, that was 2018. But again, he's a decision king, and I think he may have the best of this over Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell, he's just coming off that recent loss to Topuria, and Topuria, I mean, dude is a monster, and seeing that submission win, I thought it probably would have ended via KO, but seeing a submission win shows that Bryce Mitchell probably does have some things to still work on, because I thought Bryce Mitchell had really good jiu-jitsu. So seeing him get submitted by Topuria, who I thought he would probably had more of a chance of being knocked out by. That being said, I have Evloev. I think he can just take it out and win this via unanimous decision. Bryce Mitchell, he's gone to decision. He has the wins himself, but Evloev, the fact he's undefeated, it's hard to not side with him. I mean, him being minus 260, I think a lot of fans see it as well.
Yeah, man, and not only is Evloev undefeated, but he's seen a lot of competition. As you mentioned, his wins against Dan Ige are huge. Multiple UFC veterans he's beaten. And Bryce Mitchell's been there, done that with Edson Barboza too, who he beat via decision last year in 2022. So definitely not that Bryce Mitchell doesn't have experience, but I think Bryce Mitchell is going to be definitely at the disadvantage standing up here. Evloev, to me, has by far the better striking. And although Evloev is a couple inches shorter, the reach advantage is actually in Evloev's favor. I think he definitely has a pretty easy time piecing up Bryce Mitchell. I definitely don't expect him to get the knockout because, like you mentioned, Evloev's had so many decision wins. He's got a big, nice, good gas tank is what I'm trying to say. But he isn't going to necessarily come in swinging and knock out Bryce Mitchell in round one. And if Bryce Mitchell tries to go to the wrestling, which is pretty much his biggest strength, I think Evloev is going to be just fine. Evloev has his own wrestling advantages and strengths that I don't think Bryce Mitchell is just going to be able to take him down and have his way. So that being said, man, I definitely agree. And I heavily agree, obviously, because this is my most confident pick of UFC 288 that Evloev is going to get the win. I definitely lean by points, but that's a pick that I'm going to be putting in a lot of parlays, and that's certainly going to be something that I'm telling everyone to put some money on because, although like I mentioned, it's minus 290, you might want to favor trying to add it on like Evloev plus over 2.5 rounds or Evloev by points, something like that to try and ease it up because it is unlikely that Evloev gets the KO, but there is some potential there in Evloev getting a submission, I would say, on Bryce Mitchell. It wouldn't be the first time. Bryce Mitchell got broken by Ilia Topuria, and also by broken, I also mean mentally, man. Bryce Mitchell on social media has just been like poking random fights and like adding Elon Musk and stuff. It's just kind of weird, dude. I think Bryce Mitchell's mental isn't necessarily all there like it used to be. I don't know. So for those reasons, I definitely have a huge favor on Evloev this Saturday.
Yeah, for sure, Nick. So there you guys have it. Both Nick and I have Evloev. Nick has him for his 5-weight, and I have him as my 3-weight. And for my 5-weight, this one's actually between the women's strawweight and it's Jessica Andrade versus Fury Yan. Right now, Yan, she is the betting underdog at plus 150, while Jessica Andrade is the betting favorite at minus 194. Jessica Andrade, she's coming off a loss to Erin Blanchfield, but I'm still siding with her. She got caught in the second round, but before that, she was running an incredible. She was running a 3-fight winning streak, but she's only been getting beaten by the best. Valentina Shevchenko, Rose Namajunas, Weili Zhang. Erin Blanchfield, that fight, did catch me off guard. I feel like if it could have kept going, maybe Jessica Andrade could have, put her out because Jessica Andrade, she just throws. What I like about her and why I like always siding with her is just how tough she is and how explosive she is. She throws a lot of punches and she has power to back it up. But before I get too into it, Nick, what weight do you have this fight at?
So I agree on picking Andrade. She's my 2-weight, so I have a relatively decent amount less confidence, but still thinking I definitely agree that I'm picking Andrade to win this fight. In fact, I would consider keeping Andrade in the alert for a couple parlay options as well. She's a pretty heavy favorite, so it's tough to bet her just one-on-one. But to me, her loss recently against Erin Blanchfield isn't as significant in that she really took it like 7 days ahead. And I don't know, man. Erin Blanchfield is just a dog. I think that's just kind of what it comes down to. Not all women's UFC or even women's MMA fighters can just come in and dominate like Blanchfield has, and a few of them struggle early on. But that being said, I think Andrade is going to come back tough. I think this benefits her that this is at 115. And I think Andrade, there is a little bit of a height discrepancy there. And that's one of the main things keeping me down to the 2-weight instead of keeping her as up as my 4-weight or something like that. It's just because there is a height discrepancy there. I think Andrade is live for a knockout really at any time. But Xiaonan Zhan is also a very good striker herself, and she will have a little bit of a size advantage. So how much will that matter? I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening here. But it's also worth noting that Andrade does have, I would think, a little bit of a jiu-jitsu advantage if that comes into play.
I totally agree with you, Nick. I think if Jan wants to get it done, I think the recipe to defeat Jessica Andrade is really has to be early. You have to put her out early. Well, she really needs to outclass her on the feet if she's going to drag it out all 3 rounds and win it by decision. Her dictating the match, I don't see it happening. I think I see Jessica Andrade pressing forward and probably controlling the mat time either on the feet or on the ground. So that being said, yeah, I have Jessica Andrade, and yeah, it's totally live to have her win via knockout. So that being said, yeah, I have her as my 5-weight. And like you said, you have her as your 2-weight.
Yep. Yep, no, and that's also a really good point that you make with needing to take Andrade out early. The fighters that have taken her past like round 1 or 2 and still won are like some of the better fighters, or at least have definitely been UFC champions, like Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Rose Namajunas. So, I mean, yeah, it's just unlikely that Xiaonan is going to be able to knock out or really, I think, impose her dominance on Andrade early in the fight. Moving on to so we've gotten both of our 5 weights covered. So let's move on to what's going to be my 4 weight of Saturday afternoon. And this is going to actually be dipping into the opening fight of the main card. Kron Gracie making his return off of a few years' absence against Charles Jourdain, someone who's been quite the opposite in terms of activity. This is going to be interesting to see, almost kind of a clash of styles in a sense. But I get the difference here in the money lines. Me picking Kron Gracie as my 4 weight is the underdog pick at plus 164 with Charles Jourdain a minus 215 favorite. And I can I can understand it. Charles Jourdain's been a lot more active, and he's really been kind of like a highlight reel almost of sorts in pretty much all of his fights as of late. Kron Gracie is just more of like a family name kind of person, and it's like a reliance on the fact that I know he's not being lazy. Even though he hasn't fought since 2019, I feel like I can pretty much reliably say that he's been in the gym, consistently honing in his craft from that day on. And that being said, that's part of the reason I'm pretty confident in him. But before I get too deep into things, Jose, what's your pick on this one?
Yes. So for this one, I also have it as my 4-weight, but I actually have Charles Jourdain taking the win. And reason being is, like you said, he's definitely been more active since Kron Gracie last fought against Cub Swanson. And he went to decision against them when he just lost via unanimous decision. And though I do think Kron Gracie, his boxing is improving, his stand-up, he throws 5.15 significant strikes per minute. So that's actually pretty good for jiu-jitsu being his strong suit. So his striking, he showed it against Cub Swanson, even though Cub Swanson outclassed him, he did show good things. And as long as Charles Jourdain, I think, he throws 5.84 significant strikes per minute. So regardless where this fight's at, on the feet, it's going to be a lot of strikes. It's going to be a high pace. And I think Charles Jourdain, if he avoids Kron Gracie's jiu-jitsu, he can win this via unanimous decision. I just think he needs to do what Cub Swanson did and just avoid falling to Kron Gracie's jiu-jitsu trap. I'm sure Charles Jourdain's going to probably, if he knocks down Kron Gracie may want to pull Charles Jourdain to his guard. So it's up to Charles Jourdain to decide where he wants to do from there, whether he wants to ground and pound or if he wants to try to out-grapple Kron Gracie, which I think if he tries doing that, that is going to be the immediate goodbye. So that being said, like a lot of people, you would think like maybe Charles, if I had Charles Jourdain, he would be, maybe I would go for him in a lower weight, like 1 or 2. But I just truly think that if he plays the game right, he should have a path to victory on the feet with this one.
Yeah, man, that's totally understandable, and I think that's a good way to look at it. I think if Jourdain can avoid the jiu-jitsu and the grappling, like you mentioned, that Gracie's going to be looking to do, he does have, at this point, there's no reason to say he doesn't have the striking advantage. I am banking by picking Gracie on the fact that he has spent time working on his striking and that it's going to show. Because like you said, there's footage now that Jourdain can go and watch and see the blueprints, right, on how to beat Gracie and just see that Cub Swanson fight. But, to me, I'm looking at that like, yeah, the Cub Swanson's kind of one of a kind guy. And I'm just not sure Jourdain can replicate what a guy like Cub Swanson was able to do. And this was like 4 years ago almost now. So, I get Cub Swanson's definitely not young, but this is 4 years ago before he's necessarily considered like super old as well. So I don't know, man. That's part of the reason I have Kron Gracie here. And for the listeners, I feel like this pretty much says, I'm picking Kron Gracie because I think the jiu-jitsu will become a factor, and in that case, he'll easily handle Jourdain. And Jose's picking Jourdain because he thinks he will be able to avoid the grappling. Now, I don't want to put words in Jose's mouth, but in general, Jose is expecting Jourdain to be able to avoid that jiu-jitsu grappling strategy of Gracie, and with that, we'll be able to beat him in the striking aspect. And our four weights replicate the viewpoints that we are pretty confident in each of our scenarios happening for this fight. So for listeners, you pretty much decide whether or not you think Gracie can get that jiu-jitsu game plan into this fight, and that'll be the pick that you have on this pretty much, at least according to us here at Moneyline MMA.
Yeah, spot on, Nick, with that analysis. 100%. I definitely, that's the way I definitely view it. And again, another big factor too is just the productivity of Charles Jourdain since then. Even though he's gone back to back losses, again, like you mentioned, now Kron Gracie's 34. He was 30 or 31 when he last fought. That's I'm really interested to see because he for being 34, he doesn't actually have that many fights on his record too. So I'm interested to see what he's really trying to do with his UFC career, whether he's just trying to get fights or actually make a title run. Because not saying like it's impossible. Yoel Romero and Davidson Figueiredo's come in later in their careers, and gone on to do good things. So it's not saying it's too late for Kron Gracie, but I'm just saying there is a time limit. While in terms of Charles Jourdain, he's been very active and he's the younger guy too. So that's why I do think like it'd be smart of him to avoid the jiu-jitsu. It'd almost be like I would just be shook, if he didn't, avoid the jiu-jitsu. So, that being said, yeah, we both have this fight as our 4-weight.
Yeah, man, it'll be super interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's always worth considering mindset when you're looking at picking a fight. And if Gracie doesn't have the mindset of wanting to strive for better because he wants to make the belt run, he wants to make his childhood dreams come true or something, like that's what kind of can set some guys apart, and that's what makes some other picks that we're going to be discussing on this card, for me at least, hard, because mindsets to me make a big difference. We see it with like the BKFC fight last night with Luke Rockhold giving up after his lips cut and his teeth are loose. Personally, I don't think Mike Perry gives up at that point. There's a difference in mindset, and some guy will decide to give up earlier than another guy because they have a predetermined notion at what their limit will be. Right. And if Kron Gracie's limit isn't going to be high enough, he could easily be outmatched by Charles Jourdain's just pure will to do everything he can to become a UFC champion.
Yes.
That being said, though, so that's my 4-weight of the afternoon and Jose's 4-weight at the same pick there. So we'll move down to what my 3-weight of Saturday afternoon is going to be, which finally brings us to the main event. Henry Cejudo and Aljamain Sterling, a fight I'm personally so excited to see, and I'm definitely going to be taking Triple C here for my 3-weight pick. Look, the thing that deters me from putting Henry Cejudo as my 5-weight on this really just comes down to the size difference. I mean, wow, man, I don't know about you, Jose. I've seen Aljamain Sterling post some social media like tweets and stuff. He is huge, man. He looks ripped. He looks like he's in phenomenal shape. And honestly, like, it's going to be, that's one thing, like I'm thinking, how hard is it going to be for him to cut weight? Because he's nowhere near 135 pounds. There's no way. At least when he was taking the pictures that he recently posted. So we'll see if, what he ends up looking like. He's clearly made this cut before, so it's not something I'm necessarily concerned about. But it is worth, noting because he looks huge. And Henry Cejudo, man, he's just one of the best combat fighters of all time. So Jose, what do you have for a pick on this?
Yeah, man, like yourself, I have Triple C as well. It's crazy to see. Yeah, I knew this was a tough one to decide on for me because since Henry Cejudo left the UFC, Aljamain Sterling has fought 4 times, and he's looked, besides I guess like that one disqualification, but he still, I mean, he went 4 rounds with Peter Yan, so that was still a full-on fight regardless. So he's just been active, more active than Henry Cejudo since then. And it's right now the odds both are right now I'm seeing on FanDuel, yeah, both are minus 113. So it's pretty dead even right now. So yeah, people are. I agree with that right there. It is, it can go either way, but you start, Triple C before he left the UFC, he was actually looking better. Like, he was entering his prime. I mean, he was finishing people. He finished TJ Dillashaw, Marlon Moraes, and Dominic Cruz. And, he gets the job done. And I believe it when he says that he can defeat Sterling. Sterling, he's good, but, he's shown some flaws too. People like Peter Yan were able to kind of expose some of it, but Sterling got better. So I'm just really interested to see the dynamic Cejudo brings in, because Cejudo has great striking and great wrestling. So it's an interesting matchup. But for this one, it's just hard to not side with Triple C, with especially all the credentials he has on under his resume.
Yeah, man, and I've been following his YouTube channel a lot. He just seems to know so much about the MMA game, and I know for a fact that he's been doing nothing but watching film after film on Sterling in his recent fights, and probably even fights before then too, on his come up to get the belt. And I guarantee Cejudo's got an entire bag of tricks. And some people say that also being a coach ends up teaching you more about yourself than being the student at times. And Henry Cejudo has been doing this thing with his gym for a while now, working with guys like John Jones. I mean, it's just insane. The guys this guy's worked with, it's next to none. And the other thing I'm thinking about is that Aljamain Sterling, he has definitely seen some good competition, right? But there's no chance that Aljamain Sterling's resume even gets close to the guys that Henry Cejudo have fought in his career. It's insane. Like, Sterling's fought Peter Yan twice, which is great. Corey Sandhagen's a really good fighter. Pedro Munoz, teeters in the top 10. TJ Dillashaw is a legend, but he had one arm, right? That's about it, man. Aljamain Sterling has not been there and done that with the best UFC fighters at 135 of all time, like Henry Cejudo has. And Henry Cejudo, other than the first time he met up with Demetrius Johnson, Henry Cejudo has otherwise come up victorious just about every single time. And I just don't expect that to change. It's kind of the similar reasoning that I have with Kron Gracie, and that Henry Cejudo's just a gym rat. Like, there's no way he has been training his butt off day in and day out, since the very day he stopped fighting. Like you said, it's not like he's come off a loss or, had a tough one like Kron Gracie had a tough one against Cub Swanson. But no, Henry Cejudo has dominated, and he took a break. And to be honest, I think he's going to continue running on that same step that he left out on against Dominic Cruz.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, Nick. I mean, like you mentioned, like they both, like, yeah, Sterling, great names, but Dominic Cruz, future Hall of Famer, Marlon Moraes, I mean, beating them in the third round. I mean, he knocked out Sterling in the first round back in like 2017. TJ Dillashaw, Henry Cejudo beat, was like, a dehydrated TJ Dillashaw, probably not a good TJ Dillashaw either, but not an injured one like Sterling. But so they both didn't really fight like a prime TJ. But regardless, they got him. Beating the Demetrius Johnson split decision, that's good. Beating Sergio Pettis, current champ over at Bellator. Hey, that's great. And then, he got TKO over Wilson Reese back in 2017. So he's just been nothing but being a beast. And I just, again, him, I'm interested to see how much better he's going to be now that he's back. He did look a little out of shape at points, but I don't think that's a problem. I'm sure he's going to be in tip-top shape like come Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, I'd fully expect so. I mean, even on his channel, they're obviously not giving away too much, but like, he's been doing the whole like walk out, get the gear on, and like do a 5 round. Like, he's been doing the whole thing of like the motions of a 25 full minute fight. So I'd fully expect Cejudo to be in a pretty good shape here. But again, I just couldn't get to muster the courage quite, or the confidence to get him as my 5 weight. I'm still confident he'll win here, but 3 weight, for some of the smaller reasons of the size disadvantage, and also that Aljamain Sterling is very used to being the villain. I suspect that he will be again getting booed. Maybe I'm wrong, but Aljamain is used to being the quote unquote villain, the guy that people may or may not think is going to win. I get that in this case it's kind of even odds, so he's not necessarily can be labeled as the underdog, but I think mentally he's going to feel like the underdog. And I think he kind of ends up thriving in those scenarios. So that's kind of the main things why I couldn't get Cejudo as a 5 weight here.
No, I hear you, man. He's my one weight just because I do think highly of him, but again, just for me, just he's my one weight because just Sterling's productivity, and Sterling the second time, he shocked us against Peter Yan the second time he fought him, so who knows, he can probably shock us against Henry Cejudo. Um, it's very realistic, but that being said, yeah, I have him as my one weight, and you as your three weight. Now that moves on to well, just one more fight to talk
That
about
brings
then, and
us,
that's
yep, to what will remain to be the co-main event.
yes, sir, and that's between the welterweight, yeah, between Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns. And right now, Gilbert Burns, well, right now the odds are Gilbert Burns is the betting favorite at -140, while Belal Muhammad is the betting underdog at +110. Dude, I'm gonna say, like, Belal Muhammad's gonna be my dog. He's the dog. He's my dog. He's the underdog. I'm going with him. He's my two weight. So who do you have then? If you have your one weights left, right?
Yeah, it's my one weight, and I've already got Kron Gracie as one of my more confident dogs, so I can't say Bilal's my dog of the week unless things change towards Saturday, because that's always subject to change when you record a week early. But I agree. I got Belal Muhammad currently as my one weight. This is one I've been going back and forth on, man. There's reasons to like both fighters here, in my opinion. So pretty much by me putting Belal at my one weight here this week, I don't think I can put any money on this situation personally. Of course, you can keep an eye on our Twitter at Moneyline MMA to get our picks on Saturday to see if those underdog picks have changed. But honestly, man, I would definitely currently be more confident as my weights show in betting the underdog Kron Gracie than betting Belal Muhammad. I think he'll be ready to fight. The Ramadan thing isn't as much of a concern to me. He's won previous fights either during or just after Ramadan, so it's not like it's a first time thing for him. I don't necessarily think he'll be like completely out of shape and dead. I just think Gilbert Burns is really on a really good streak lately. He's a scary guy to bet against, man.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah, like this is a tight one as can be, and that's why I have him as my two weight. Gilbert Burns a legitimate threat, and that fight against Kamza, this can be something similar to that Kamza fight. I mean, Belal Muhammad. I mean, both guys throw like a good amount of strikes. They take a good amount of damage, and both go around takedowns. Their average are pretty similar. So they're not much difference in size either, and even their records aren't too far off different from each other. Both have similar overall fighting experience, even in the UFC as well. So, and Belal Muhammad's just riding an incredible win streak. And he's not that much bigger than Gilbert Burns, but I think he's going to be probably a little bit the thicker guy. I'm assuming, like, I think off season maybe he's a little more on the heavier side, so I think he may have a little more strength going for him. But I thought the same thing about Kamza, and man, Gilbert Burns really brought it to Kamza, and he looked up phenomenal against Jorge Masvidal. So I'm interested to see how he's going to do, because this is like the last minute fight. So I'm interested to see how Gilbert would do fighting on a short notice.
So yeah, man, and that kind of brings me to why I did land on Muhammad in the end. Is you bring up the fight like Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat, and Gilbert Burns just stood there and boxed Khamzat for pretty much 15 straight minutes, and Khamzat ended up it wasn't necessarily by straight up volume. It was by more power and damage. I think Kamzat ended up getting the win. And Kamzat also had a knockdown on Gilbert, which is mainly the deciding factor there in Kamzat getting the decision win. I think Gilbert Burns trying to do that against Belal Muhammad gets a similar outcome. I just don't see Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad standing there, not wrestling at all, and Gilbert Burns getting the decision win. I don't know, man. And that being said, that's one of the main reasons I think Belal Muhammad is pretty live. This is a 5-round fight, so everybody keep in mind that this will be 25 minutes if it's going to go to decision. That also is worth considering. But both of these guys have had a 5-minute fight in their career, so they both showed in the past the ability to go to the 5-round, 25-minute decision. It's not something I'm necessarily betting on, but also Bilal's slight size advantage to me means it's going to be a little harder for Gilbert Burns to utilize what he might perceive as a jiu-jitsu advantage. But Belal's not going to be that outmatched there, to be honest. I'm not too concerned about it. Belal's takedown offense is incredible in its own right. I don't know, man. I don't think Belal is really that concerned about it. Unless it's like one of those situations where Gilbert Burns, I'd say, has a little bit more power than Belal, knocks him, clips him, gets a knockdown, and then Gilbert Burns gets on his back. That's bad, right? That's not what you want. But outside of that, Belal Muhammad, I think, can kind of control where this is going to be. And that being said, he'll get the decision win or something along those lines.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nick. And yeah, I agree too. Like, this is a risky one to definitely put money on. I don't even know. I can't even say what method they would win by. I don't know. Maybe, Gilbert Burns has 9 submission wins, but I don't know. I mean, Muhammad's never been like lost via submission. So yeah, I think that is not very likely, but I still see it maybe either knockout, TKO, or split or unanimous decision. So it's 5 rounds, so it's very interesting to me. So that being said, yeah, it's just a very tough one. That's why I have it as my 2-weight.
Yeah, for both of us, like we both kind of agree, and again, just a final recap for viewers, that puts the final list at my most confident pick of UFC 288 being Movsar Evloev, my second most confident pick, the underdog Kron Gracie, my third most heavily weighted pick here is Henry Cejudo, my second heaviest weight, which means it's less confident than the rest, is Jéssica Andrade. And my final pick of least confidence is Belal Muhammad. Jose, do you want to run down your picks real quick?
Yes. So yeah, for my fifth weight is Jéssica Andrade. My 4th weight is Charles Jourdain. My 3rd weight is Movsar Evloev. My 2 weight is Belal Muhammad. And my 1 weight is Triple C Henry Cejudo.
Perfect. So for the final locks and underdogs of the week, as I mentioned, those will be tweeted on Saturday on our Twitter. Definitely leave a comment down below if you have any questions and to let us know who you're going to be betting on. If you think Kron Gracie will be able to implement his jiu-jitsu game plan or Charles Jourdain will be able to deflect it away and win a striking decision fight. That being said, thank you for listening, and we will all, as always, be back for the next UFC card. Enjoy UFC 288, everyone.